You've convinced yourself that choosing money over love makes you stronger. But what if that choice is actually the weakest thing a man can do right now? Thousands of successful men are lying awake at 3 a.m. in empty beds, surrounded by expensive things that can't hold them when they're afraid, can't celebrate their victories with genuine joy, can't provide the deep satisfaction that comes from being truly known and loved by another human being. They've won the game everyone told them to play, but they're losing the only game that actually matters. And the Roman philosopher Seneca, who was once the wealthiest man in the most powerful empire in history, understood exactly why this happens and what it costs you in ways you haven't even begun to calculate. If you've ever wondered why your success feels hollow, why your achievements leave you hungry for something you can't name, why the security you've built feels more like a prison than freedom, then you need to hear what Seneca discovered about the real price of choosing wealth over women. Because the truth about this choice will either wake you up to what you're missing or confirm that you're already dead inside and just haven't admitted it yet. Lucius Annaeus Seneca lived the ultimate contradiction that modern men face every day. Here was Rome's wealthiest advisor, a man who accumulated vast fortunes while serving Emperor Nero. Yet he spent his life writing about the dangers of placing money above all else. Seneca didn't speak from ivory towers or academic theory. He wrote from the trenches of power and wealth, understanding both their seductive pull and their hidden costs. His letters reveal a man who had everything money could buy, yet recognized that true wealth lay elsewhere. This wasn't philosophical posturing, but hard-won wisdom from someone who had walked the path most men dream of walking. The brilliance of Seneca's approach lies in his refusal to demonize wealth itself. He understood that money is simply a tool, neither inherently good nor evil, but powerful in its ability to reveal character. Seneca recognized that the real question isn't whether you have money, but whether money has you. He watched countless men in Rome's elite circles sacrifice their marriages, their friendships, their peace of mind, all for the promise of security that wealth seemed to offer. Yet he observed that the wealthiest men often lived in the greatest fear, constantly worried about losing what they had gained. Their riches became golden handcuffs that bound them to a life of perpetual anxiety, rather than the freedom they had sought. What made Seneca's perspective revolutionary was his insight that true wealth begins with mastery over your own desires and fears. He taught that a man who needs nothing is richer than one who has everything but still wants more. This wasn't about becoming a monk or rejecting material success. It was about understanding that your relationship with money determines whether it serves you or enslaves you. Seneca proved that you could engage with wealth and power while maintaining your soul, but only if you kept clear about what truly mattered. His Stoic foundation teaches us that the man who chooses wealth over women isn't choosing strength. He's choosing the illusion of control over the reality of human connection. Money whispers seductive lies to every man who listens too closely. It promises control in an uncontrollable world, safety in an inherently dangerous existence, respect from people whose opinions shouldn't matter. Seneca recognized this fundamental deception because he lived it firsthand. In his letters to Lucilius, he reveals how wealth creates the illusion that you can buy your way out of life's essential vulnerabilities. The wealthy man believes his bank account can shield him from heartbreak, rejection, loss, and death itself. Yet Seneca observed that the richest men in Rome often lived in greater terror than the poor, constantly calculating threats to their fortune and status. The promise of security through wealth becomes particularly toxic in how men approach relationships. Money offers what seems like a simpler transaction. You pay, you receive. No emotional risk required. Unlike the messy uncertainty of human connection, financial success appears measurable and controllable. Seneca saw how this false promise led men to treat relationships like business deals, always calculating return on investment rather than embracing genuine intimacy. The man who chooses wealth over women believes he's choosing certainty over chaos, but he's actually choosing isolation over authentic human experience. Seneca's genius lay in exposing how this illusion of security actually makes men more vulnerable, not less, when your identity depends on external wealth. Every market fluctuation becomes an existential threat. When you've traded emotional connections for financial ones, you discover that money can't hold you when you're afraid, can't celebrate your victories with genuine joy, can't provide the deep satisfaction that comes from being truly known and loved. The security wealth promises is always temporary, but the insecurity it creates runs much deeper than any financial loss. Seneca understood a truth that destroys many successful men. The very wealth meant to buy freedom often becomes the strongest prison. He wrote extensively about how riches create their own form of bondage, trapping men in cycles of acquisition that never satisfy but always demand more. The wealthy man tells himself he's building security, but Seneca observed how each new level of success brings new anxieties, new threats to protect against, new competitors to outmaneuver. What began as a quest for independence transforms into slavery to market forces, business demands, and a constant pressure to maintain an image of success. These golden chains bind men in ways that go far beyond financial stress. Seneca noticed how wealth changes a man's relationships with everyone around him, creating suspicion where trust once existed. Friends become potential business partners or threats. Family members become beneficiaries or burdens. Romantic interests become gold diggers or status symbols. The successful man finds himself isolated by his own achievement, unable to determine who genuinely cares for him versus who cares for what he can provide. This isolation becomes self-reinforcing, driving him deeper into the pursuit of wealth as his only reliable source of validation and control. The most insidious aspect of these golden chains is how they convince the prisoner that he's actually free. Seneca warned that the wealthy man often believes his money gives him options, yet he discovers his choices have narrowed to maintaining and expanding his fortune. He can't take risks on genuine relationships because too much is at stake. He can't pursue passions that don't generate income because his lifestyle demands constant cash flow. The man who thought wealth would give him everything discovers it has cost him the very experiences that make life worth living. Seneca witnessed how wealth corrupts the very nature of human connection, turning love into commerce and intimacy into negotiation. When a man views relationships primarily through the lens of what he can provide or receive, he reduces the profound mystery of human bonding to a simple exchange rate. The wealthy man learns to lead with his wallet rather than his heart, believing that financial generosity can substitute for emotional availability. Seneca observed how this transactional approach creates relationships that feel hollow despite their material abundance, connections based on utility rather than genuine affinity or shared values. This poverty of transactional love reveals itself most clearly in how such men handle conflict and vulnerability in relationships. Instead of working through emotional challenges or opening themselves to genuine intimacy, they attempt to solve problems with money, gifts, or lifestyle upgrades. Seneca understood that this approach fails because the deepest human needs cannot be purchased. The need to be truly seen, accepted, and loved for who you are rather than what you possess requires emotional currency that no amount of wealth can provide. The man who chooses money over women often discovers that even his romantic relationships feel like business partnerships, efficient but ultimately unsatisfying. The tragedy Seneca identified is that transactional relationships create a feedback loop of increasing isolation. When you consistently choose financial solutions over emotional engagement, you never develop the skills necessary for genuine intimacy. Your capacity for vulnerability atrophies. Your ability to read emotional cues diminishes. Your comfort with uncertainty in relationships disappears. Eventually, even when you want to connect authentically, you find yourself trapped in patterns of exchange rather than genuine human bonding. Rich in resources, but impoverished in the very connections that give life meaning. Seneca discovered the most revolutionary concept in a man's relationship with wealth, the precise moment when enough becomes truly enough. In his letters, he wrote about the profound freedom that comes from defining your own finish line rather than chasing an endless horizon of more. This wasn't about settling for mediocrity or abandoning ambition. It was about recognizing that the man who never knows when he has enough will never have enough. Seneca practiced voluntary poverty exercises, deliberately living simply for periods to remind himself that happiness didn't depend on luxury. He understood that the person who can be content with less has more power than the one who always needs more. The virtue of enough transforms how a man approaches relationships because it removes the compulsive need to prove his worth through acquisition. When you're not constantly chasing the next financial milestone, you have mental and emotional bandwidth to invest in human connection. Seneca observed that men who had defined their enough were more attractive to high-quality partners because they radiated contentment rather than desperation. They could engage in relationships from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, offering their presence and attention rather than just their resources. This shift from proving to being creates space for authentic intimacy to flourish. What made Seneca's approach radical was his recognition that enough isn't a number. It's a mindset. Two men with identical bank accounts can have completely different relationships with wealth based on their internal sense of sufficiency. The man who has cultivated enough can take risks, pursue passions, and prioritize relationships because his security comes from within rather than from external validation. He's free to choose love over money because he's not imprisoned by the endless pursuit of more. Seneca made death his most trusted advisor, regularly contemplating mortality not from morbid fascination, but as a clarity tool that cuts through life's illusions. He practiced memento mori, the daily reminder that death comes for everyone regardless of wealth or status. In his final years, Seneca wrote extensively about how proximity to death reveals the stunning irrelevance of most things men spend their lives pursuing. No dying man ever wished he had spent more time at the office or accumulated more assets, but countless men have expressed profound regret about relationships they neglected or love they pushed away in favor of financial success. The deathbed perspective transforms everything about how a man evaluates his choices. Seneca understood that when you truly accept your mortality, the security promised by wealth reveals itself as complete fantasy. You can't take money with you, but the love you've given and received echoes in ways that outlast any material legacy. The man who chooses wealth over women is essentially betting that the things that matter least will somehow matter most when everything else falls away. Seneca's letters reveal his growing understanding that the richest life isn't measured in coins, but in moments of genuine connection and experiences of authentic joy. What made Seneca's approach to mortality so powerful was his insight that death anxiety drives most of men's worst decisions around money and relationships. The fear of death manifests as a fear of not having enough, not being enough, not leaving enough behind. But when you face mortality directly, you discover that enough love shared and received is the only wealth that provides genuine comfort. When facing the ultimate uncertainty, the man who has chosen authentic relationships over accumulation faces death with peace rather than regret. Seneca recognized that opening yourself to love demands far more courage than accumulating fortune. Yet modern men consistently choose the easier path of financial pursuit. Building wealth requires discipline and strategy, but it operates within predictable systems with measurable outcomes. Emotional intimacy offers no such guarantees. It demands that you risk genuine parts of yourself with no promise of return. The man who chooses money over women often believes he's choosing strength over weakness. But Seneca understood that avoiding emotional vulnerability is actually the path of least resistance. True strength lies in risking your heart despite knowing it might be broken. The courage required for authentic relationships reveals itself in countless daily moments that wealth can't prepare you for. You must learn to apologize when you're wrong, to admit when you're afraid, to ask for help when you're struggling, to express love without knowing if it will be returned. Seneca observed that these acts of emotional bravery build a different kind of strength than financial success ever could. The man who has learned to be vulnerable in love develops resilience that no market crash can destroy, confidence that no competitor can shake, and a sense of worth that exists independent of external validation. What makes emotional wealth so challenging is that it requires you to remain open. Despite inevitable pain, Seneca faced betrayal, loss, and disappointment throughout his life, yet he continued to value human connection over protective isolation. He understood that the alternative to vulnerability isn't strength, it's numbness. The man who walls himself off from emotional risk doesn't become invulnerable. He becomes incapable of experiencing the very rewards that make life worth living. True courage lies in choosing love despite its risks, not in avoiding love because of them. Seneca understood what modern men consistently forget. Time is the only currency that matters because it's the only one you can never earn back. In his letters, he wrote obsessively about time's true value, warning that we treat our most precious resource as if it were infinite, while hoarding money as if it were scarce. Every hour spent building wealth is an hour not spent building relationships. Every evening sacrificed to work is an evening lost to love. Every weekend consumed by ambition is a weekend stolen from connection. Seneca recognized that the man who chooses money over women is making a fundamental miscalculation about life's actual exchange rates. The tragedy of this miscalculation becomes clear when you examine how time compounds differently in wealth versus relationships. Money can grow exponentially through smart investments, but human connections deepen through consistent presence and shared experiences that require your actual time. Seneca observed that the wealthy man often discovers too late that relationships can't be built in concentrated bursts the way fortunes can. You can't make up for years of emotional absence with expensive gifts or lavish vacations. Intimacy requires the slow accumulation of ordinary moments shared together. The compound interest of love operates on a completely different timeline than financial returns. What made Seneca's perspective revolutionary was his recognition that time spent on relationships is never really spent. It's invested in the only wealth that appreciates regardless of external circumstances. The memories you create, the trust you build, the love you share all become more valuable with age rather than less. The man who has chosen to invest his time in authentic human connection discovers that this wealth can't be stolen, taxed, or lost in any market crash. It enriches everything else he does, while money without love enriches nothing at all. Seneca's greatest achievement wasn't rejecting wealth, but learning to hold it lightly, demonstrating that a man can pursue prosperity without sacrificing his capacity for genuine human connection. He never advocated for poverty as a virtue in itself. Instead, he showed how to engage with money and success while maintaining your soul's freedom. The key lies in understanding that wealth should serve your values rather than defining them. It should enhance your ability to love and connect rather than replacing those needs entirely. Seneca proved that you can be financially successful and emotionally rich simultaneously, but only if you keep clear about which one serves the other. This middle path requires constant vigilance because wealth has a gravitational pull that can slowly distort your priorities without you noticing. Seneca practiced regular self-examination, asking himself whether his business decisions aligned with his deeper values and whether his pursuit of success was enhancing or diminishing his relationships. He understood that the danger isn't in having money but in letting money have you. Not in being successful, but in believing success makes you superior to those who have chosen different paths. The balanced man uses his resources to create more time and opportunity for the people he loves, rather than using them as substitutes for genuine presence. What makes Seneca's approach so practical is his recognition that financial stress can destroy relationships just as surely as financial obsession can. The middle path isn't about finding some perfect balance between money and love. It's about understanding that true prosperity includes both material security and emotional fulfillment. When you stop seeing these as competing priorities and start seeing them as complementary aspects of a rich life, you can pursue both without sacrificing either, building wealth that serves love rather than replacing it. Seneca spent his final years contemplating what remains when everything else falls away, and his conclusions challenge everything modern men believe about building a lasting legacy. Your bank account dies with you, your business empire eventually crumbles, your material achievements fade into historical footnotes, but the love you've shared and the lives you've touched continue rippling through generations in ways you'll never fully comprehend. Seneca understood that the man who chooses wealth over women is essentially choosing a legacy that ends at his funeral over one that echoes through eternity. The relationships you build and the hearts you open create impacts that compound across decades, in ways no financial investment ever could. The profound irony Seneca discovered is that the men most obsessed with leaving a lasting mark through wealth often leave the smallest actual impact on the world. Their money gets redistributed, their companies get sold or dissolved. Their names get forgotten by everyone except tax attorneys and estate planners. Meanwhile, the man who prioritized authentic human connection leaves behind children who feel truly loved, partners who experience genuine intimacy, friends who carry forward the wisdom and kindness they received. These relationship legacies don't appear in any will or estate documents, but they shape the world in ways that outlast any material inheritance. What made Seneca's perspective on legacy so revolutionary was his understanding that immortality isn't achieved through accumulation but through transformation. The wealth you hoard dies with you, but the love you give transforms everyone it touches, and they carry that transformation forward to others in an endless chain of human connection. The man who has chosen relationships over riches discovers that he's built something far more valuable than any fortune. He's contributed to the eternal human story of love overcoming fear, connection conquering isolation, and hope defeating despair. Seneca's wisdom cuts through centuries to reveal a truth that haunts every man who has ever chosen the safety of wealth over the risk of love. You can spend your entire life building financial security and still die spiritually bankrupt. The philosopher who advised emperors and accumulated vast riches understood that the choice between money and meaningful relationships isn't really a choice at all. It's a delusion that prosperity and connection must compete rather than complement each other. The man who thinks he's choosing strength by prioritizing wealth over women is actually choosing the illusion of control over the reality of human experience, trading the temporary security of money for the lasting fulfillment that only authentic love can provide. But here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. If you died tomorrow, would you be remembered for what you accumulated or for how deeply you loved and allowed yourself to be loved? And more importantly, which legacy would actually matter to the person lying on that deathbed, looking back at a life either rich in connection or rich only in regret? If this reality check has stirred something in your soul, if you're ready to explore what it means to build wealth without losing your capacity for love, then subscribe to this channel, because we're just getting started on the journey toward becoming the kind of man who can have both prosperity and profound human connection.